Captain Tessa Hale sat in the conference room, the hum of the air purifier and the faint click of the holoprojector the only sounds breaking the stillness. A display hovered before her, showcasing the faces of representatives from the Council, a vast coalition of alien races spread across the galaxy. The screen flickered as the images of their leaders appeared, their alien forms intimidating but not entirely unfamiliar. Tessa could sense the weight of the moment pressing down on her, as if the very air around her was thick with tension. This was not just any meeting. This was the decision that would change the future of humanity forever. "Humanity stands at a crossroads," spoke the lead representative, a towering being with translucent skin, its internal organs visible like an intricate map. The Council was offering Earth an alliance, a partnership that promised endless technological advancements, unparalleled peace and protection against the rising threats in the universe. "Join us, and we will ensure your future. You will have access to knowledge and resources far beyond your comprehension. Together, we will reshape the galaxy." The words echoed in the room, and for a moment, Tessa allowed herself to think of what such an offer could mean. The possibilities were endless. No more hunger, no more disease. A future where Earth could thrive, freed from the wars and poverty that had plagued it for centuries. But there was one catch. The humans would have to surrender their full autonomy, bowing to the Council's leadership and following their directives. Tessa clenched her fists under the table, her mind racing. To accept meant to give up everything that had made Earth unique. Humans had fought for their independence for centuries. The idea of surrendering to a galactic alliance, no matter how powerful, felt like a betrayal. She wasn't sure how the rest of humanity would feel, but she knew where she stood. The offer sounded too good to be true, and in her experience, that meant there was something more beneath the surface. As the Council representatives continued their speeches, promising humanity a place among the stars, Tessa couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. These beings were ancient, far older and more experienced than humans could ever be. They had seen entire civilizations rise and fall. But why, after all this time, were they suddenly extending a hand to humanity? Was it out of genuine goodwill, or was there something darker at play? Suddenly, the air in the room grew colder, and Tessa felt a chill run down her spine. It wasn't just the temperature, it was as if something unseen, something far more sinister, was hovering just beyond the edge of her senses. She glanced around the room, her eyes meeting those of her fellow leaders. They all seemed to be paying rapt attention, their faces a mixture of awe and apprehension. But Tessa could see the doubt in their eyes, the same doubt she felt gnawing at her gut. The Council's representatives paused, waiting for a response. Tessa's heart raced. The humans were being given a choice, a chance to join the most powerful alliance in the galaxy. It was an opportunity they could never have imagined. But was it worth the price? She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor as she moved toward the holographic display. The room fell silent, the weight of her decision heavy on everyone present. "I have one question," she said, her voice steady, though her mind was swirling with questions. "What's in it for you? Why offer Earth this alliance now?" The Council leader regarded her with an almost imperceptible nod. "We see potential in your species, Captain Hale. The human race has shown remarkable resilience and intelligence. You've survived wars, disasters, and countless struggles. We believe you are ready to take the next step and join us in the greater purpose of the galaxy." "But why now?" Tessa pressed. "What makes Earth so special that you would offer us this alliance when so many other races have been left to fend for themselves?" The representative's eyes glowed faintly, a sign of some deeper emotion, perhaps impatience, perhaps amusement. "You may not fully understand it yet, but your planet holds something unique, a potential we have been watching for millennia. It is time for humanity to reach its true potential. The Council can guide you, shape you into a force unlike anything this galaxy has ever seen." Tessa's mind raced. This was it, the moment she had feared. The Council wasn't offering humanity a chance to thrive because they cared for Earth. No, They saw something in the humans, a power, a secret buried deep within their DNA, something that could shift the balance of power in the universe. This wasn't about peace or prosperity. This was about control. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft, almost imperceptible beep from her wrist. She glanced down at the device, a message from her closest advisor, Lieutenant Anders. It read, "Captain, there are anomalies occurring around the planet. Strange signals are being broadcast. We're not sure where they're coming from, but it's as if something is warning us." Tessa's heart skipped a beat. A warning? Was it the Council, trying to send a message before the vote even began? Or was something else at play? Something far more dangerous? As the Council leaders continued their pitch, promising Earth an unimaginable future, Tessa's mind was made up. She wasn't going to be swayed by their words. Earth was not going to give up its freedom, no matter the cost. "Thank you for your offer," she said, her voice unwavering. "But humanity will not surrender its independence. We will not bow to any force, no matter how powerful. We reject your offer." The room fell into a stunned silence. The Council representatives exchanged quick glances, their alien faces unreadable. Tessa could feel the weight of their gaze, the unspoken tension hanging in the air. She had made her decision, but what would happen next was anyone's guess. The decision had been made. Humanity had rejected the Council's offer. It was a choice that would reverberate across the galaxy, and no one knew what the consequences would be. Captain Tessa Hale stood tall, her heart pounding as the silence stretched on. The Council's representatives, once so confident, now stared at her with expressions that were hard to read. Tessa knew they hadn't expected this. No one had. For centuries, the Council had extended their power, collecting planets into their fold without a single race daring to defy them. But humanity had just done the unthinkable. They had said no. The lead representative's voice finally broke the stillness. "You will regret this decision," he said, his tone cold and final. "You have no idea what you've just done. You have no idea who you've just angered." Tessa's fingers tightened into fists, but she kept her composure. The words felt like a threat, but they also carried an underlying message that sent a shiver through her spine. The Council wasn't just angry, they were preparing for something, and she didn't know if humanity was ready for it. The holographic display flickered for a moment, then shut down entirely. The representatives disappeared, leaving Tessa standing alone in the conference room. She exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the moment sink in. The Council's face had disappeared, but the tension in the air remained. The room buzzed to life as the other leaders, those who had voted with Tessa, began to speak. There was no cheering, no celebrating, just an uneasy sense of dread. The decision was made, but there was no turning back now. "We've done it," Tessa said, her voice quiet but firm. "We've rejected them. Now we have to prepare for whatever comes next." But even as the words left her mouth, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was already happening. A strange, quiet hum had begun to vibrate through the walls of the building. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible. But as Tessa listened, it grew louder, more insistent. It was coming from somewhere outside. She turned toward the window, her eyes narrowing as she tried to make sense of the growing sound. Then the alarm started. The sharp, blaring noise shattered the tense silence, and the lights in the building flickered. The emergency lights kicked on, casting everything in an eerie red glow. Tessa's pulse quickened as she rushed toward the door, her mind racing. What was happening? Was it the Council? Had they already begun retaliating? She stepped into the hallway, her boots clicking against the cold floor. Soldiers and officers rushed past her, their faces grim, their expressions filled with a sense of urgency. Tessa reached the main control room, where Anders was already waiting for her. His face was pale, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Captain," he said, his voice tight with panic. "It's happening. The ships are here." Tessa's heart skipped a beat. "What ships?" "The Council's ships." "No," Anders replied, shaking his head. "These ships, They're not like anything we've seen before. They're not from the Council. These ships are different. We don't know who they belong to, but they've just appeared in Earth's orbit. There's no communication, no warning. They're just here. Tessa stared at the large screen in the control room, her eyes scanning the radar feed. Sure enough, there were dozens of objects hovering above the planet. Silent, unmoving, but unmistakably present. Some of the ships were massive, dwarfing Earth's largest vessels. Others were small and sleek, darting between the larger ones like predators stalking prey. Where did they come from? Tessa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Anders shook his head. We don't know. We're trying to triangulate their origin, but the signals we're getting are scrambled. It's like they don't want us to know anything about them. The room fell into a stunned silence. The ships didn't belong to the Council, but they were clearly connected to the rejection in some way. Had the Council sent these unknown vessels to retaliate, or were they a different threat altogether? And if so, why were they here? Captain, there's more. Anders continued, his voice tense. We're receiving strange signals from Earth's surface. They're weak, almost like a whisper, but they're coming from all over the planet. And they seem to be getting louder. Tessa's stomach twisted in knots. Signals from Earth's surface. That didn't make sense. The planet was supposed to be under no threat, at least, not from anything internal. She felt a cold shiver run down her spine as she realized what this meant. The mysterious ships and the strange signals were connected somehow. And they were here for a reason. Can you track where the signals are coming from? Tessa asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Anders nodded. We're working on it, but I don't think it's random. The signals seemed to be guiding us towards something. Tessa's mind raced. Was this the Council's retaliation, or was there something even darker at play here? The uncertainty was overwhelming, but one thing was clear. Humanity had just stepped into something far bigger than they had imagined. The galaxy was watching, and the stakes were higher than ever. Whatever happened next, Earth was going to need every ounce of its strength and resolve to survive. As Tessa turned to face the control room's massive screen, she felt the weight of responsibility settle onto her shoulders. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. Humanity's fight for survival had just begun. The world seemed to hold its breath as the unknown ships loomed above Earth, their presence both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The sky was filled with them, vast, silent vessels, some as large as cities, others smaller but still imposing in their sleek designs. They hovered over every major continent like ancient giants watching the planet below. There were no weapons, no demands, no messages sent through traditional means. The ships were ominously quiet, almost as though they were waiting for something. Captain Tessa Hale sat in the command center, her hands gripping the edge of the console. The situation had escalated faster than she had imagined. Less than 24 hours after rejecting the Council's offer, Earth had been thrust into an unknown conflict. She could feel it in her bones. Whatever these ships were, they weren't here to negotiate. The peaceful alliance the Council had promised was slipping further away with each passing minute. Captain, we've got a new signal. Anders' voice crackled over the intercom. He sounded out of breath, and Tessa could tell something was wrong. Go ahead, Anders. What's happening? Tessa responded, trying to keep her voice steady. She knew that the next few moments could determine the fate of the planet. The signal. It's not just a warning. It's a command, Anders explained. It's being broadcast from one of the ships directly. It's in a language we've never seen before. But there's something else. It's not like anything we've encountered. The encryption is far too complex for our systems to decode. We're getting fragments of it, but nothing that makes sense. Keep trying, Tessa ordered, her mind racing. The Council had been clear. The consequences of rejecting them would be severe. But these ships, this was something else. She couldn't shake the feeling that these vessels were not part of any normal retaliation. They were far more advanced, far more terrifying. Anders' voice interrupted her thoughts. "Captain, we've received another transmission. This one from Earth itself. It's strange, but it seems like the planet is reacting. There are seismic anomalies all over the world. We've also detected changes in the magnetic field. It's as if Earth is waking up, responding to something we don't understand." Tessa stood up abruptly, her mind piecing the puzzle together. The signals from the surface, the seismic activity, it was all connected. But to what? Why now, and what was the connection to these mysterious ships? "Find the source of the signal," she ordered. "We need to know where it's coming from. If the planet is reacting to something, we need to understand what it is. And I want every available resource monitoring those ships. We need to know what they're doing, and we need to know now." As she turned to face the windows overlooking the city skyline, a feeling of dread settled over her. The world below seemed so peaceful from up here, but that peace was an illusion. The unknown forces surrounding Earth were not content to wait. They had already made their presence known, and there was no going back now. The planet's autonomy was no longer in question. Whatever these ships wanted, whatever this new threat was, it was here. Moments later, the console beeped. "Captain, we've got something," Anders said, his voice strained but filled with urgency. "We've pinpointed the signal. It's coming from deep beneath the surface. We believe it's originating from an underground facility. But this location doesn't appear on any of our maps. It's hidden." Tessa's heart skipped a beat. An underground facility. How could something like that exist without their knowledge? Earth had been scored for centuries, every inch mapped and explored. There was no way something so significant could be hidden without anyone noticing. Unless, of course, it had been deliberately kept from them. But who or what had done that? "Tell me where it is," Tessa ordered, her voice barely above a whisper. Anders quickly relayed the coordinates, and Tessa's eyes narrowed as she studied the data. The location was in the middle of an uncharted desert region, miles away from the nearest human settlement. It was as if the place had been purposefully kept off the grid. Without hesitation, Tessa turned to her team. "Prepare a strike force. We're going to that location. We need answers, and we need them now." The decision to send a team underground, to a place that could hold the key to humanity's survival, was a risk. But Tessa knew they had no choice. The surface world was being watched, the ships hovering ominously above, and Earth's fate seemed to hang in the balance. Whatever was hidden beneath the ground could hold the answers they desperately needed. As the strike force assembled, Tessa couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. But the alternatives were worse. Ignoring the signal, pretending that everything would work itself out, would be disastrous. They needed to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Hours later, the team arrived at the coordinates. The desert stretched endlessly before them, its barren landscape offering no clues, no signs of what lay beneath. The facility was hidden deep underground, and no surface-level structures betrayed its existence. The air was heavy with anticipation as the team set to work, digging, scanning, and scanning again. And then, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, something happened. The ground beneath them trembled. At first, it was just a slight vibration, barely noticeable. But then it grew stronger, more violent, as if something huge was shifting deep below the earth. The sky seemed to darken as the winds picked up, and for a moment, it felt as if the very planet itself was responding to the intrusion. The ground cracked open in front of them, revealing an entrance, an ancient, massive door, seemingly forged from metal unlike anything they had ever seen before. It was covered in strange markings, glowing faintly in the darkness. The symbols seemed to pulse, almost as if alive. Tessa stood at the threshold, her heart pounding. She had no idea what lay behind that door, but she knew one thing for certain. Humanity's fight had just entered a new phase. They were no longer fighting for survival against an alien alliance. No, they were fighting against something far older, something far more dangerous. And the door they had just uncovered was only the beginning. As the massive door groaned open, the team stood in awe. The air around them seemed charged, as if they were crossing into an ancient realm, untouched by time. The strange markings on the door flickered briefly, casting an eerie glow across the desert landscape before vanishing into the darkness behind. Tessa took a cautious step forward, her boots crunching against the gravel. The hum of the planet's energy, the vibrations beneath their feet, continued to pulse with an unnatural rhythm. The door had been waiting for them. But why? And who had hidden it? "Stay alert," Tessa ordered, her voice low but firm, her eyes scanning the area. The team fell into formation as they moved into the darkness of the underground passage. Inside, the corridors stretched long and narrow, walls covered in more of the strange symbols. They glowed faintly, guiding their way forward. The air was stale, thick with dust, and the scent of ancient stone. It was as if no one had set foot here in millennia, but the path was clear, deliberately preserved, as though someone, or something, had made sure the entrance remained intact for this very moment. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the soft echoes of their footsteps as they descended deeper into the earth. Tessa couldn't help but feel the weight of something watching them. The walls seemed to hum softly in response to their presence, the hum becoming louder with every step. It was as though the passage itself was alive, waiting for them to unlock its secrets. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shifted again, and the passage opened into a vast chamber. Tessa and her team halted, their eyes adjusting to the dim light that now filled the space. What lay before them was unlike anything they had ever seen, an enormous room filled with alien technology, sprawling like an intricate web across the stone floor. Ancient machines hummed with power, their purpose unclear but unmistakably advanced. It was a place out of time, a place beyond humanity's comprehension. In the center of the room was an enormous structure, its form alien and organic, yet mechanical at the same time. It resembled a giant seed or pod, nestled in the heart of the chamber, its surface covered in intricate, pulsating veins. Around the pod were what appeared to be devices of unknown origin, an array of tubes, lights, and crystalline structures, all connected to the pod in some way. "Captain, what the hell is this?" Anders's voice was barely a whisper, his eyes wide as he gazed around the room. This looks like it was made by something far beyond our technology." Tessa didn't respond immediately. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of the impossible sight before her. The ship's signals, the strange vibrations across the planet, the odd response from Earth itself. It was all leading here. But what was this place? Who built it? And why had it been hidden beneath the surface for so long? She moved forward cautiously, her hand reaching for a console nearby. It was ancient, but somehow still functional, its surface warm to the touch. As her fingers brushed across the surface, a series of lights blinked to life, and a low, rumbling voice filled the chamber. "Access granted. Initiating protocol." The voice was neither human nor alien. It was something else entirely, mechanical, but also ancient, filled with a resonance that seemed to echo from the very core of the planet. The pod in the center of the room began to tremble, its veins pulsing more rapidly now, as though responding to the activation. "Captain, what's happening?" Anders's voice broke through the sudden tension. "I don't know," Tessa replied, her mind spinning. The pod was coming to life. Slowly, it opened, revealing a dark, hollow interior. Inside was what appeared to be a crystal, faintly glowing, suspended in a web of intricate filaments. The crystal seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, its glow brightening as they watched. Is that what's been causing the signals? Tessa wondered aloud. She didn't know how, but everything about the scene screamed of ancient power, something tied to the fabric of Earth itself, yet far beyond anything humans had ever encountered. "Captain," Anders said urgently, his eyes not leaving the crystal, "do you think this is the source, the thing that's been calling to us?" Before Tessa could respond, the voice spoke again, this time louder, resonating through the chamber as if the entire facility were alive. "The awakening is near. The time of the humans has arrived. The words sent a shiver down her spine. What did it mean by the time of the humans? How did it know about Earth, about humanity? And what was this awakening? Suddenly, the pod emitted a high-pitched sound, and the lights in the chamber flickered violently. The ground beneath their feet began to shake once more, this time with far more intensity. The entire room seemed to tremble as the crystal in the pod began to glow brighter, its energy spiking. Tessa's instincts screamed at her to get out. "Move, now," she shouted, but before they could retreat, a blast of energy shot from the crystal, enveloping the room in blinding light. The air crackled with raw power, as if the very essence of the planet itself was being drawn into the chamber. The team scrambled, but the energy surge was too much. The light burned everything in its path, filling the air with a deafening roar. Tessa's mind was flooded with images, flashes of ancient civilizations, wars fought across the galaxy, and then visions of Earth herself, alive, sentient, pulsing with energy. The crystal in the pod seemed to call to her, to beckon her toward it, as though the planet itself was awakening. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, the light faded, and the shaking stopped. Tessa blinked, disoriented, as she slowly regained her bearings. The chamber was silent once again, the pod now dormant, its energy seemingly drained. But the sense of power in the room was undeniable. Something had changed. "Captain," Anders said, his voice trembling with awe and fear. "What was that? What just happened?" Tessa took a deep breath, her mind racing to make sense of the impossible. She looked at the team, all of them wide-eyed and shaken. "I don't know," she whispered, "but I think Earth is awakening, and we're caught in the middle of something far bigger than we ever imagined." They had entered the hidden depths of the planet, searching for answers. But what they had uncovered was just the beginning. The crystal, the pod, the mysterious voice. It was all part of something much older, something far more powerful than humanity could ever have predicted. And whatever it was, it had just chosen humanity to be its catalyst. The question was, could humanity survive what was coming next? The moment the team exited the underground chamber, the air above Earth felt different. It was as though the entire planet had shifted. The once calm and unyielding presence of the mysterious ships now hovered with a renewed sense of urgency, as though they had sensed something beneath the surface stir to life. Tessa felt an unshakable sense of being watched, but the gaze wasn't human. It was something older, something much more powerful. "Captain," Anders said, his voice tense, "we've got movement from the ships. They're changing course. They're not stationary anymore. They're heading straight for the planet's surface." Tessa's heart skipped a beat. She had feared this moment would come, but now that it was here, she couldn't shake the dread settling in her chest. The ships were on the move. If they had been waiting for something beneath Earth, what would they do now that it had been awakened? And more importantly, what were their intentions? "We need to prepare," Tessa said, a steel edge to her voice. "Make sure the defenses are up. Get me a line to the global leaders. We need to coordinate. This isn't just about us anymore. The whole planet's in danger." Anders nodded, turning to relay the orders. But as Tessa stood there, her mind racing, she couldn't shake the feeling that the battle ahead wouldn't be one of weapons and warfare. It would be something much bigger. These ships, these beings, weren't just here to destroy. They had something in mind, and humanity was at the center of it all. The rest of the team gathered around, their faces grim but determined. Tessa knew they were all feeling the weight of the decision they had made when they rejected the council. The consequences were rippling out, and now Earth had become the focal point of an intergalactic struggle. The unknown force had already begun to make its move. But why? As Tessa stepped back into the command center, she was greeted by a flurry of activity. Officers and tech specialists were running diagnostics, coordinating efforts to track the ship's movements. A map of Earth's surface was projected on a large screen, showing the ship's trajectories, which were rapidly converging toward one specific location. "Captain, the ships. They're heading straight for the site where the facility was," Anders said, his voice shaking. "It's as if they're drawn to it, like they know something we don't." Tessa's eyes narrowed. "They're drawn to Earth's core," she muttered to herself, her mind racing. The strange pulse they had felt beneath the surface, the crystal, the awakening, it was all connected. But how? And why were these ships so determined to reach that location? "We need to get to the surface," Tessa said, her voice growing sharper. "Now. We can't wait for them to arrive. The facility might be our only chance to understand what's happening here." Without waiting for a response, Tessa turned on her heel and marched toward the launch pad. The strike team would need to be ready, prepared for whatever they might encounter when they arrived at the facility. As she stepped into the shuttle, she couldn't help but feel the weight of what they had uncovered. The ancient machinery, the crystal, the mysterious force that seemed to have chosen Earth. None of it made sense. But one thing was clear. Earth was not just a battlefield in some cosmic war. It was the battleground. As the shuttle ascended toward the surface, Tessa's mind continued to churn through the possibilities. There were no answers yet, only more questions. But there was one thing she knew for certain. Whatever had been awakened deep within Earth's core was far more powerful than anything humanity had encountered. The ship, still hovering overhead, seemed to draw nearer, casting a long shadow over the landscape below. It was enormous, its structure so vast that it dwarfed everything else around it. The closer it got, the more Tessa felt the oppressive weight of its presence. It wasn't just an object in space. It was a harbinger, a signal that something far beyond their understanding was about to unfold. As the shuttle broke through the atmosphere and descended toward the desert region where the facility was located, Tessa's thoughts turned to the words that had echoed through the chamber beneath Earth. "The time of the humans has arrived." What did that mean? Was humanity's rejection of the Council truly the catalyst for this awakening? Or was there something more to it? Something far older than the Council, perhaps older than the ships themselves. The shuttle touched down with a soft jolt, and Tessa wasted no time in disembarking. The area around the facility was eerily quiet, the ground still cracked from the energy surge that had burst forth when they activated the crystal. But the structure, that strange, pulsing pod, was gone. In its place was only an empty cavern, a hollow space that seemed to echo with the lost power of what had once been. And then she saw it. Rising from the depths of the cavern, an enormous pillar of light shot upward into the sky, its source unclear but unmistakable. It wasn't a beam. It wasn't a weapon. It was something else entirely, something alive. The ground beneath them shook again, this time with a violent force that knocked several members of the team to the ground. Tessa steadied herself, her eyes scanning the horizon as the light grew brighter, spreading outward, stretching across the sky like a living web. It was as though the planet itself was reaching out, communicating with the ships hovering above. "Captain," Anders shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The ships, they're reacting. They're not coming to attack. They're connecting." Tessa's heart raced as she realized what was happening. The ships were not attacking Earth. They were sensing with the planet, integrating with it in ways that defied all logic. The pillars of light, the strange energy, the glowing symbols, it was all part of something larger, a connection between Earth and these ancient alien beings. "We need to stop this," Tessa shouted, realizing the true nature of the threat. If these ships connect with the planet fully, there's no telling what might happen. We need to shut it down now. But as she turned to lead the team back toward the chamber, she realized the truth. There was no shutting it down. This wasn't a war. It was the beginning of something much bigger. Earth was no longer just a planet. It was becoming something else entirely. And humanity, whether they were ready or not, was now a part of that transformation. The time of the humans had indeed arrived. But what that would mean for the future, no one could predict.